love to hang out on the forums, and so that's one thing that I really like to do. I like to also just I love to work with Tableau. So I'm a consultant with Technion Data Solutions, and I've been there for 10 years, and I've loved my job the entire time. But once I started to get to use Tableau, that really made things fun. So I love day-to-day just working with Tableau. But in off hours, what I really love to do with Tableau is to push the limits. And so I'm gonna talk about the blackjack game here in a little bit, but first I just wanted to talk about pushing the limits with Tableau. And that's what I love to do. I love to see what's possible and what can be done. And I've been doing it for a little while now, so just wanted to show a little bit of what I've done. One dashboard that I did that I really enjoyed doing and learned a lot while I was doing it is this one here, the joy of Viz painting. So early this year, Tableau ran a 3-minute win dashboard contest. So what kind of dashboard could you create in 3 minutes? So I created one and narrated it as I created it. And one of my coworkers watched the video and said, you sound a lot like Bob Ross as you build the dashboard there. And so that was the inspiration for this one here, the joy of Viz painting. And so let me show it in action. And it's really kind of cool because what it lets you do is it lets you interactively paint a painting on a dashboard. So I just select which elements I want Bob Ross to add to the dashboard, and he'll or to his canvas, and he'll add it there. And so I can add elements, I can remove elements as I want. I can even I've got a couple of different paintings, but what's really kind of cool is if I switch it to all, then I can sort of create a mashup of Bob Ross paintings. So all kinds of fun things you can do with that. But that was one dashboard that I did that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and it's not your typical dashboard. It's not something that you would typically do with Tableau, but it's something that was really fun to do, and it's something that as I did it, I learned a lot of how Tableau works and what can be done with Tableau. So that's what I like to do. After that, I'd always wanted to create a choose your own adventure book, and I got to thinking, why not create it in Tableau? So I wrote and created this entire choose your own adventure book, and it's a single dashboard, and it allows you to travel through time and solve a mystery as you're traveling through time. So the title is The Time Traveling Data Analyst. It's a completely fictitious story of a data analyst who chases this guy named Russell through space and time, but always a step or two behind him. Never quite able to catch up. But along the way, he gets help from a lot of friends in the past. He discovers some really cool things along the way, like Enigma machines. And in the future, he gets to meet some amazing people. So completely fictitious, no relation to reality, but a fun story nonetheless. And then after that, I thought, what can I do next? Well, Noah Salvatierra created some really cool Tableau dashboards, which he said showed that Tableau can actually have some artificial intelligence. And I thought, oh, well, if Tableau is going to have artificial intelligence, we need to teach it to play tic-tac-toe, because, as we all know, artificially intelligent machines like to play thermonuclear war, and that can be dangerous. So we have to teach them that there are games you just can't win. So I built the tic-tac-toe dashboard, and yes, I did use Comic Sans font. As I said, I like to push the limits. Maybe that's pushing it the wrong way, though. So why push the limits? Why do things with Tableau that Tableau was never designed to do? So Tableau was designed as a data visualization tool. It was designed as a platform for data discovery and quick iterative a quick iterative cycle of discovering data and visualizing it, asking questions that raise new questions that you can answer by looking at the data. So why do crazy things like Bob Ross paintings or tic-tac-toe dashboards? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why pushing the limits with the platform and seeing what it can do can be really, really good. First of all, it's fun, and it just unleashes creativity. So I enjoy doing this, and it helps me be creative. It helps me as I solve problems to think, is there a creative out-of-the-box solution? So even in my day-to-day job where I'm visualizing data for clients and helping them answer questions, there are times when we'll hit a roadblock, and I'll think, there was a creative solution that came up when I was dealing with tic-tac-toe or dealing with Bob Ross, and I can apply that here in my day-to-day job. So, and it's fun, and it really stretches you too. So doing things that you wouldn't normally do, it raises a whole new set of issues, and it forces you to confront problems that you'd never have to face otherwise. So that can be a really good thing. And then also it allows you to make some really incredible discoveries. So if I'm just following the instruction manual or step-by-step on how to create a bar chart, that can be useful, but when I'm trying to create something that I've never done before and that maybe nobody else has even ever done before, that's a time when I'm going to make some incredible discoveries about what can be done, what kinds of things is Tableau doing behind the scenes, and that can be a time when you just make some amazing discoveries, and we'll see some of those today as we look at the Blackjack dashboard. And then finally, it proves what can be done. So Tableau is just an amazing piece of software. It's an amazing platform because you can do things with it that it was not designed to do. And the reason you can do that is because of the way that it's been designed. So it's not a piece of software that puts you in a box and says, well, follow these wizards and then we'll come up with these charts in the end. It's an open platform, and you can do almost anything with it. You can visualize data, but if you understand how it's visualizing data and how it's working with data, and you understand some of the features that are available when you build dashboards, then all of a sudden you can do some amazing things, and you can prove out that there are things that Tableau can do that no one would have ever thought that it could do. And so that's what's fun. So why push the limits? Well, I think those are some good reasons why to push the limits. So today, what I'd like to look at is the Blackjack dashboard. So Patrick mentioned that the next conference is in Vegas, and indeed, I'd heard some rumors. So as I wrote up my blog post, I said, well, if you can't wait for the Tableau conference next week, then play some blackjack, and maybe that'll sharpen your skills in case the future conference is in Vegas. But then I was able to update that and say, since the next conference is in Vegas, you can get some experience with blackjack. So I'll just show a little bit of how it works, but first let's just take a look at it working. So the first thing you do is you select your bet. You can read through some of the rules here. So there's a little bit of difference here with the way that the Tableau Blackjack works. So there's only one deck of cards, no splits, no doubling down, and you can only get up to 5 hits, which probably won't need that many anyways. But we select our bet. And now we're going to have to do it again because we timed out our session. So we select our bet, $1,000, probably decent. And now I've got a decision to make. So I've got 15 points. I don't know how many the dealer has, but 15 probably is enough, so I'll take a hit. And I won, 21 points. And the dealer stated 18. And then what I can do is, whether I won or lost, I can actually tweet that to the world and tell them, did I win, did I lose? So I just won $1,000 playing blackjack with Tableau, and test your luck, I'll modify this tweet a little bit to say, while presenting Think Data Thursday, and I'll tweet that out. All right, so how in the world is this dashboard created? Because you'll notice if I refresh the screen, so you saw how that game progressed, but the next game will be completely different. The cards are randomized, they're shuffled, so at least they should be. This looks the same, so let's refresh. We'll see that sometimes they're not, and we'll talk about why they're not. But hopefully this time I refresh. And we take a look. And this time it is indeed a different game, so let's see if I can win with 9 points. Probably not, so the dealer won that one. All right, well, let me pull up Tableau. All right, so here it is in desktop. And you'll see it looks pretty much the same. And we'll take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. What I'll do is instead of just tearing this one apart, we'll sort of build it up from scratch, and I'll show you what's going on with the data itself. We won't dive into every last detail of it, but I'll walk through enough of it that hopefully you get an idea of what's going on, how it's working, and then I'll open it up for some questions at the end. So let's take a look at the data. What I've got is I've got a couple of different data sources. We'll start here with what I'm calling the secondary data source, and we'll talk about why that's important. But I'll start here because this is my deck of cards. So you can see I've got a card ID, and if I scroll all the way down, I've got 52 cards. So that's great. You'll notice I've got things like the card number and the suit. That's not really even necessary. So when I created the data set, I thought maybe I'll need that. But in reality, it's a lot easier to look at the cards as images and to see them. So I've got some custom shapes that I just assigned to the card ID. And so you'll notice here that we can just look at our cards and see what they are. And it's a lot easier than just reading text about the cards. And so I've got my deck of cards. And the first thing that I knew I would have to do in order to get something that could be played over and over again rather than just a single game is I would have to be able to shuffle the cards. I would have to be able to randomize the order. So what I've got is I've got some random number generation logic going on here, some calculations that give me some random numbers. And I've actually got a document out there in the Tableau calculation library that describes how to create random numbers. I've got a post on my blog as well. I'll show the calculation here pretty quickly, but I won't go into all the details. You can look up some of the details on how it works. But I've got a seed here that kind of gives me a random seed, and then I'm multiplying that out by the second, the minute, and the day. And that's important because when I go to publish this on Tableau Public, I need something that's going to change every time that you look at it. Well, there's not a whole lot that I can access that allows me to do that other than maybe the time of day. So that's constantly changing. The seconds and minutes and hours and days are constantly changing. So I can grab that and use that as part of my random number generation. And that's going to help me in one way, but it's going to make it more difficult in another. And the way that it helps is it gives me a random number. The way that it makes it difficult is that random number is constantly changing. So if you're looking at a random order of cards, I don't want that to change after you've looked at it the first time. All right, so I've got a random order here. And if I put that here on rows, this will randomly order the cards. So it's just assigning a number between 0 and 10,000 randomly to each card. And you'll notice as I refresh, so I hit F5, I refresh the data, and every time the Tableau queries the data source, the seconds are changing on that random number. So the cards are getting shuffled every time Tableau sends a query to the data source. Well, that's good, but there's a problem with that, because the way that I want to allow you, the user, to interact is by giving you some parameters. So I've got these parameters here that let you make some choices. So I'll show a couple of them. So you get some choices here as to what you want to do in the game. You can choose nothing. Well, nothing is selected by default, but you can choose to hit or stand on each play. So now nothing's happening when I select this because I haven't hooked it up to the view. But if I create a calculated field here based on choice 1, so I'll call this choice 1 value, and we'll just keep the parameter in there, so that'll give us the value of the parameter. And now I take that choice 1 value. I'm going to make it a dimension, just so when I add it to the view, it just gives me a header as a discrete field. So I'll put it there on columns. Well, notice that the cards reshuffled just by adding that choice 1 value. And then the problem is you're looking at the cards and you're making your decisions. Will you hit or stand? So you make a selection, you say hit, and notice the cards shuffle again. Or you say stand, and the cards shuffle again. Well, that's not going to be very helpful when you're actually playing blackjack if the cards are getting reshuffled every time you try to make a decision. So what can we do about that? Well, this is where understanding a little bit of what Tableau does and what it can do can be very helpful. So when you're working with a single connection to a data source, this is the way that Tableau is typically working. So I like to think of it this way. This is sort of a simple model to help me understand. Here's Tableau sitting on my desktop machine, and I've got a data source. Maybe that's a local data source. Maybe that's on a server. It doesn't really matter, because when I'm dragging and dropping fields in Tableau, what Tableau is doing is, first, it's generating some VizQL, some visual query language. That's an amazing thing, but that gets translated into some flavor of SQL or MDX or TQL, and that is getting sent to the data source. The data source engine is running that query, and it's returning aggregated results to Tableau. Now, if I'm just moving around the same fields within the view, that gets cached, and Tableau is not sending the query each time. So that's one way that I might be able to save some values that might change each time. The problem is that Tableau will send a query to the data source anytime I'm changing a parameter value that's in a calculated field in the view, or anytime I'm using a time or date function. It will also send a new query to the data source. So the cache doesn't help me too much on a single connection. So then I think, well, what about a blended connection? So when I use data blending, it kind of works like this. I've got Tableau sitting here, and for the primary connection, it works much the same way. I'm sending the query down to the primary data source. It's sending back aggregate results, and sort of in a simplified way of thinking about it, then it sends a query to the secondary source, and it gets back aggregated results, and then it blends that together there in the data cache. So what can I do using data blending? Well, it turns out that there's a way that if I keep my random numbers in the secondary source, I can get Tableau to cache those values, even though it's sending new queries to the primary data source and getting back the results there. But it's keeping those secondary values in the cache, which means that my random numbers, they get generated one time, and then they sit there in the cache. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to create a new view now, and I'm going to switch to what I'm calling my primary data source. And so this is very similar. I've got a card ID here that matches my card ID on the secondary. And since we found it easier to look at them by shape, I'm just going to do that. So here's my deck of cards. We'll take a look at all of those, make them a size that we can see. And then what I've got is I've got some calculations here, but the key one is a calculation that I'm calling shuffle order. And if we take a look at that, what that's doing is it's grabbing the random order field from the secondary source. Now I have to treat that as an aggregation because what I want to do is I want to rank it, and so I'm going to give it a unique rank. And when I take this calculated field, assuming that so every table calculation here, I'm going to compute using the card ID. So I'm going to use that for my addressing, and when I do that, now I'm going to get a random ordering of cards based on the shuffle order. But now notice what happens when I go up here and say data, and I go to my primary and I say refresh, the same as hitting F5. It didn't change. So I can hit F5 and refresh. Tableau can send queries to the primary data source all day long, but it is keeping that secondary value in cache. And so that's a wonderful thing. Now if I switch back to my secondary connection and I hit F5 here and refresh, now I come back to my primary connection. Notice how it's reordered those cards. So I'll do that again just in case you didn't see it. So notice ace, 2, 6. I come back to the secondary source. I refresh. That clears the cache of that secondary source, and when I come back to the primary, now I've got a reordering of cards. But as long as I don't allow that secondary source to get refreshed, it will keep my random order intact. And so that was sort of the biggest hurdle of the Tableau Blackjack game, was figuring out how am I going to keep these cards, how can I randomize them one time, but keep it in a consistent order after that until the next time you play. So after that, the next big thing is okay, I've got a nice shuffled deck here, but I need a way to split that into 2 players. So what I've got here is I have my shuffle order, but I also have a display order. And so if we look at what the display order does, is it's just splitting the deck arbitrarily at card 26. So if the shuffle order is greater than 26, then we'll just go back to 1. We'll subtract 25. Otherwise, we'll get the shuffle order. And here's what that looks like. So I'll bring the display order up here. So notice my shuffle order is 1, my display order is 1, 2, and 2, and all the way up to 25. But at that point, at 26, the display order restarts at 1, and so now what I can do is take that display order over here. I'll just replace the shuffle order. So now I can actually see that I've got my deck split. So it's split, it's completely randomized, and now I've got a player field that basically just looks at the display order and says, well, is that player 1, player 2, is it the dealer, or is it you? And so now I'm starting to get what is going to make up the blackjack game here. And so you can see what I'm doing in the blackjack game is I'm not dealing cards one at a time. What I really have is I have all the cards laid out for the dealer and for the player. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make you think I'm flipping cards over by whether or not I show them. And that's all based upon what the turn is, or what I'm calling the turn. So the turn uses some logic to figure out what turn it is. I'm going to show that here in the title, just so you can see how this is working. So I'll say turn. We'll add in the turn there. So you can see it's set to turn 3 right now, and the reason it's set to turn 3 is because I already made a choice. Right? But if I take my choice field here and I change this back to nothing, notice it says turn 2. And the reason I started at 2 is because that just matches the number of cards that show up to begin with. So I've got 1 and 2. And then I used that turn to decide, do I show that card or not? So I'm just going to put that up here on rows to begin with, or actually, no, on columns. So let's come back here, grab card visible, true or false. We'll put that on columns. And now you can see when we're first starting out the game, you can only see the first two cards. Those are the only two cards that are shown. And when I make a choice here on choice 1, when I say hit, now you can see, we'll see 3 cards. And I'll turn on some highlighting here so that you can see that. Let's just highlight on whether it's visible or not. So when I select true, now you can see those are the 3 cards that get shown. When I select another choice here on choice 2, I say, give me another hit. Now you can see there's actually something else going on. You can see that I'm going to see my next card because I told the dealer, give me another card. But the dealer is not going to show his next card. Why? Because he's already got enough points that he's not going any further. He's got 17 points there. And so I've got some scoring logic that I'm not going to plan to go into. You can see there's lots of logic for the dealer. The dealer is fairly complex because there's a lot of things that can determine how far the dealer goes and what decisions the dealer is going to make in terms of how he's going to be scored. But we can just take a look at the score. And if we look at it, and I'll compute using card ID. So you'll see why the dealer stopped. He got to 17 points. And so if I go back and I look at the choices of nothing, so when I start, you won't get to see anything. And as we move on, after I make my first choice, then you get to see what score the dealer has. And even at this point, there's a bust, and so there's more logic that determines whether or not the game is over or not. And that's here in this field, game over. I'll show it. I won't go through it, but you can see there's a lot of different conditions that mean that the game is over. So if you get a blackjack on the first turn, if the dealer gets a blackjack, then the game is over. So that comes into play as well. And I'll go ahead and show that. So when we first start, the game's not over, but as soon as I take a hit and get a bust, the game is over. Now, one thing I did want to point out here on the score, you'll notice that score is just a numeric field, but you'll notice that when I'm displaying it, you'll see things like question marks, you'll see 13 points. So how am I getting this numeric field to show different things? Well, what I'm doing, and then yeah, if I take a hit, you'll see it show bust. So how am I getting it to show text based on what's going on? What I'm doing is I'm applying a custom format. So I go to number format, custom, and then I've got some options here. So I can separate out positive values and then put a semicolon. This is how negative values will display. They'll show up as a question mark, a semicolon, and then negative values show a bust. So within the logic of score, I'm determining, if it's just a number of points I want to show, then it's positive, and it will show 13 points. If it's 0 for the special case where you can't see the dealer, then you'll see a question mark. If it's negative, that means you went bust. And so that's how I'm showing the different scores there. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and show these parameter controls. We'll go up to 4. And what I'm going to do is just clean this up a little bit, and then we'll see how we can turn this into an actual game. So the card visible, well, I'm going to take that over here to my filters, so that we only see what's visible. So we'll just keep what's actually shown. We'll reset our choices so that it's back to the way that it should be, and I'll update our title here. So that when we add it to a dashboard, it'll show up kind of nicely. So sheet 13, we'll add that to the dashboard. And I'm going to add it as a floating. And we'll see why that's important here in a little bit. And then I'm also just going to move these back over by adding in a blank and scooting these out of the way. All right, so one thing that you noticed in the actual game is that you don't get to see all the choices at once. You only get to see the parameters that apply to the current condition of the game. So what I did to do that was I used some layout containers, and I used some other helper sheets that help me keep things visible only when I want to keep them visible. So what I did was I created some other sheets, and I did it like this. I've got a little special field here that's just a 0. And so I create this sheet, and that just gives me, a sheet that I can actually show or not show based on certain conditions. So I want to show this sheet when I want to show choice 1. So this is going to be my choice 1. This will be show choice 1 sheet. And that's going to be shown when my turn is 2. So a little bit of disconnect there in terms of how things are going. But I want to show choice 1 when there's 2 cards visible. So there's 2, and I also only want to show it if the game is not over. So game over needs to be not true. And you'll notice that's a table calculation. So what I have to do now is I have to bring in my card ID. Let's try this again. So card ID is now on there, and I'll bring game over up here. Say true. Let's make sure we are compute using card ID, and we'll say only show it when it's false. So there we go. That's what I want. So this is show choice 1. I'll duplicate this out a few times. So duplicate that. Now this will be show choice 2. And the only difference here is this is after you've made a selection on choice 1. So once you go to hit, notice that took away this choice, but now I actually want to show it. So I'm going to take my turn field, bring that back out, and refilter it so that it is set for 3 cards showing. And the game over is false, so that's fine. So the game was over at this point anyways, but we'll duplicate this sheet again. Rename this as show choice 3. And this one happens after you show the next one. So you make a choice on choice 2. Bring turn back out there so that we can tell it now. This is shown if there are 4 cards. We'll duplicate this just one more time. Show choice 4. This happens after you've made choice 3. So now we bring turn back up here one last time, and we select it. We say OK. That's when 5 cards are showing in the unlikely event that would ever happen. And now I come back to my dashboard because, well, first, let me go back to setting nothing on all these controls. Then we'll go back to the dashboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technique to show and hide these controls that involves using some layout containers to decide whether or not they get shown. So I'm going to put my show choice 1 up here in the top of that layout container. So I added this as a floating container, and now I'm going to remove the title. I'm going to make sure it's fitting it to the entire view, which it is. And that's going to be important because what's going to happen is when I put choice 1 here at the bottom, notice that the view here is shown. My show choice 1. It has pushed choice 1 down to the bottom until I change choice 1. And once I change choice 1, now that view disappears and choice 1 pops up to the top. Well, imagine if I had something floating on top there where choice 1 had gone. Now choice 1 would be hidden. So that's what I'm going to do with each one of these. So I'm going to take another vertical layout container. I'm going to take choice 2, or show choice 2, that sheet that we created. Put that one in there. All right, we're not going to show the title on that. But we're going to take the choice 2 control and move it down into that container. Resize the container a little bit. Put it close to here. Do the same thing again, and then one more time after that. So show choice 3 goes into that layout container. Choice 3 comes down to the bottom. We'll hide the title. And then one last time for choice 4. So we'll bring out another vertical container. Choice 4 goes in there. And the choice 4 parameter goes into that container. We'll hide the title. So hiding the title is important when I want the sheet to show or hide. In many cases, because I don't want that title to be shown at all. And now to clean this up, to make sure that they're all aligned, I'm just going to take one last horizontal container, bring that one in, and now we'll get each one of these layout containers and put them into that horizontal container. And that way, they'll all take up exactly the same width. Let's get this a little bit wider. All right, so now let's get that layout container. Let's bring it down here. And so now the idea is that if I take anything, so I could take this blackjack view, I'm going to take something like a container that I can give some shading to, and I'm going to take that container, and if I position it just right, I can cover up everything on choice 1 that I don't want. Let's give it some shading. And it will also cover up all the other choices. All right, now I want to get to a game that doesn't end after I make my first choice. So I'm going to come back here to my secondary source, refresh it, come back to my blackjack game, and we'll see if this one is better. It might be. It's looking like it might. Now we can position this just right, but we need to make sure it's floating on top. Give it some more width. We don't need to see the card IDs. And now, let's see how this works. So I'm sitting at 9 points. In the actual game, I've got a little bit more logic that hides this card, so I wouldn't know how many points the dealer has, but I say, well, I probably need to take another card. So I took another card. Notice that parameter control is now behind the board, and my next parameter control is down for me to make my next choice. So I'm at 12 points. I say, well, I'll take another one. And now notice that one pops up, and the next one comes down. And I say, 14, I still need another one. So we'll take another one, and, yeah, that's a bust. But that is the basics of how the blackjack game was created. And you'll notice on the actual dashboard, there's a little bit more formatting. There's a little bit more that goes into it in terms of placing a bet. But all of this uses the same techniques. And yeah, you'll notice there are lots and lots of sheets on this dashboard. But most of them are all layered on top of each other, and you can't see them until it's time. But it's using the exact same techniques that we just saw here. And with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments. Anything that anyone has.
Wow. Yeah, Joshua, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing today. I think we have one question already from Larry Bolton, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute him. If anyone else has questions, just go ahead and put a comment in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and unmute you one at a time and let you ask your questions. With that, here's Larry.
Hi, Joshua. Yeah, I was wondering, as I was following you along as you're building the game, that when you were dealing the cards, you had the cards split into 2 groups of 26 instead of keeping it one group of 52. So doesn't that introduce an element that's not present in a real-world game? And is there a way to deal alternately, whether it's one player or multiple players around the table from one group of 52? Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't think this game would pass the gaming convention standards by any means. I'm satisfied that it's shuffled randomly and splitting the cards, but you're absolutely right. It's not the same. I think you could use maybe a mod too to alternate the cards, and that would probably work just as well. Maybe even better. In a lot of ways, that might be a more efficient calculation, keeping it numeric instead of introducing some if-then logic like I did. A good question.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see anything else in the chat at the moment. So Matt did bring up one point. Let me go. Matt, did you actually have a question too? I'll go ahead and unmute you. Matt, did you have a question there? Nope. Okay. We are recording this today, and so later today I'll go ahead and post this in the TDD recordings. So there's in the user group section of the Tableau community, there's a Think Data Thursday group. On the right-hand side of that screen, there's a link to all the Think Data Thursday recordings. And I will go ahead and have this recording posted there. It does look like we have a question from John Miller, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute him. John, go ahead.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for sharing your time today. I had a quick question. I actually raised on your Viz Banner site a question about, I think it was back during the Choose Your Own Adventure visualization, and I asked a question around selecting, making a selection and then dynamically hiding that selection to show what you intend to show. And you had answered that you use the same logic when you created the tic-tac-toe board. So I'm trying to go through. I mean, essentially, if you're familiar with like a click view, like the click to drill functionality, just wondering if that's something that you think can be used via layout containers and maybe filter actions that might get that similar kind of work that you've been doing here in this dashboard to work.
Yeah, I mean it would use something similar if I'm understanding your question. So let me go ahead and real quick just pull up some sample data, and I think what you could do then is, let's say, and I'm not completely familiar with the click to drill, but I'm envisioning that it would work something like this. So I've got my departments here, and I'm going to click a bar, and now I want it to show me a new view that has all my categories within that department. So I'll duplicate this sheet. So now I'll expand it out. So I've sort of got a sheet 1 and then a sheet 2, and I want to be able to see how one goes to the other. So the key here, I think, is going to be to take these 2 sheets and put them in a layout container. So the layout containers are nice because what they do, in addition to sort of evenly spacing things, and you can tell if it's not in the layout container. Yeah, no, actually we are. So in addition to just helping to space things out, they also will allow you to be able to do this for things where you have an action that that hides something else. So yeah, the tic-tac-toe game did, or the tic-tac-toe thing did it because it actually had two tic-tac-toe boards where I select one, and then that one gets pushed out of the way by the other one. So the way that's working is you actually have to have one more sheet. And the idea is, I'll put department on that one. So I come in here, and I've got a sheet 20. All right. So this is going to be really, really rough. Let me get rid of that for a second. So I hide the title here, hide the title here, hide the title here. And what I want is I want my click action to cause this one to become visible and cause this one to disappear. And at the same time that that one disappears, this one is going to shift over to the left and then get hidden behind something that's floating on top. So giving some shading or something like that. So it would take a little bit more setup than we probably have time for now, just because what I would have to do is I would have to get an action. Well, no, we can probably do it. It'll be really rough, but we'll do it. So I create one action that filters from sheet 18. I wish I had named these, but it's going to go to 19. We'll do it on a select, and when we deselect, we want it to exclude all values. That way I can get it to hide. We'll create one other filter action that goes from sheet 18. This time we're going to go to sheet 20, but the key is that I don't want it to actually match anything. So I'm going to just create a bogus filter here that says you select a department, and we're just going to go to some other crazy field like container, which won't match at all. And so the idea is now, oops, I better do that on select, dashboard actions, let's edit filter 2, do it on select. Let's make sure this one was on, yeah, that one's on select 2. Now I select one department, I say furniture. Okay, notice that one would shift over. We'd have to adjust a little bit of how things are being spaced. But now I'm seeing this one, and then when I deselect it, that one's going to go away. And I need to set it up so that the other one came back and push this one back out. But that's the sort of idea. It's sort of this accordion that's kind of shifting back and forth.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, Joshua, I don't see any other questions in the list. Let me just look one time through again. Do a refresh. No, I think that's it. So, thank you very much. Thanks for joining today. And like a round of applause. Although I have everyone muted, so I don't know maybe if I muted it. I'll go ahead and unmute folks, and then have a little round of applause there. There you go. You can all. Woo! Okay, and our next presentation is in a couple of weeks. We're going to have an artistic presentation from KK, one of our community members as well. So I'll go ahead and be posting some information about that later today as well. Thanks again, Joshua. Take care.
Thank you.